come on in and get settled because we are about to talk about Ready to Love. And we are going to be talking about the exit interview for Anthony that he did with Little Black Book. And we got a lot to talk about, y'all. I really enjoyed the interview. You got to be brave to come on Little Black Book. You got to be brave. It is not for the faint of heart because he's going to ask you some deep questions. He's going to go back into your history. And then you're going to get people like me coming over here doing recap reviews of the whole interview and talking about it. So you really do have to be a person that is brave. And a bravo to Anthony for coming on. Bravo to Cynthia who came on as well, because one thing we know about Cynthia, she is brave. And she did it. But I was really interested in this interview, especially after watching Cynthia's interview. I wanted to hear the other story. I wanted to hear the other half. I wanted to hear, does Anthony believe he got duped by Cynthia like I believe I got duped? I want to know how he got duped. I want to know why he got duped. And I want to know, has he learned his lesson? I want to know all those answers to all those questions that I had. I don't need to go over the season anymore. I've had enough of that. I saw it myself. I watched it over and again. I don't need to talk about the scenes anymore. I want to talk about how the heck did we get here? Because I told you in all my videos I've been doing about Cynthia, I got duped. So I had to go back in my own mind to find out how I got there. So I wanted to know, here is Anthony having even more information than me, more access to Cynthia than me, and he still got duped. So I want to know, is Cynthia really just that good? What did we all do? What did we all miss? So I'm not going to go over Cynthia's part too much, because if you haven't watched my video on her, please go back to do that. But I'm going to tell you, after watching Anthony, I feel affirmed. I feel like my suspicions about Cynthia and the fact that she is self-focused is true. I know Cynthia on the TV show, the reunion, kept saying she was emotionally unavailable. I kind of said I don't believe those are the right words, because I don't think it's being emotionally unavailable. Because let me tell you, unavailable is like somebody calling you up and saying, hey, I want to talk to you. And you go, right now I'm unavailable, but I could talk to you later. That's what unavailable means. Unavailable means I'm not available now, but I could be available later on. And I don't think that's what Cynthia's problem was. I told you she was self-focused. And it's not that she's unavailable, it's that she's unwilling, right? She ain't even picking up the phone. When you're unavailable, sometimes you say, I'm unavailable, but call me back. You know, when that little message comes through and you send the automatic reply, I can't talk right now. I'll call you later, you know, on your iPhone. Cynthia is not that. Cynthia is not even picking up the phone. She don't even want to talk to you because she's busy doing her own thing. And even Anthony said towards the end of the interview, he says, I don't even think emotionally unavailable is the word for Cynthia. He said she's emotionally unaware. She's emotionally unaware. She's just unaware of just the degree of her emotional detachment from people. And so she doesn't even get it. She doesn't get it. And I could agree with that. I think he and I are kind of saying the same thing. She's unaware. I'm saying she's unaware, but I'm going a little bit deeper. And I'm saying that not only is she unaware, but all these years she hasn't had a desire to become aware. That's a whole nother level. When you're unaware, but then when people point it out to you, do you accept the teaching? If someone says you're unaware, do you accept the teaching? Or do you continue to want to stay stuck in being unaware? And that's where I think Cynthia is. That's where I go a little bit further than Anthony. And I don't just say she's unaware. I say she's unaware and she's unwilling to go a little further. Because he also mentioned about the story going on about the whole James thing, right? As you look back on that, a lot of us could say, why the heck did she even bring James to the meeting to meet these people on this show? Why did she even bring him? She already knew who he was. She already knew his personality. Why would she bring hot mic, hot blazing James on here? So some people could say is, well, she was unaware what James would do. No, she's known James for 14 years. You know what she did? I'm going back to what I said. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. She didn't care that she would bring James on here and he might blow up the spot. And she didn't care how it would affect her because what she wanted James to do was something for her. Like I said, it's a difference between being unaware and also being the person where you just don't care about another person's feelings. Well, it backfired on her. It backfired on her because Anthony even said it was a big deal afterwards, behind the scenes, behind the cameras. And one of the things he really points to in this interview with Little Black Book is he said they had conversations about it. You know, he was trying to be nice. He was trying to be respectful. You could tell that he had genuine feelings about Cynthia, and he's not the type of person, because he is a gentleman, he's not the type of person that's just going to throw Cynthia under the bus. But he said enough for me to know that what I thought about Cynthia now is the truth. And that is she leaves out pertinent information in order to steer situations in her favor. Some people call that being deceptive. Some people call it lying. Some people call it lying by omission. But what he said was that there were a lot of situations with Cynthia where the situation didn't turn out to be the way she originally described. And that's what I'm talking about in the whole season. That's how I got duped. I listened to Cynthia, but then in the end, the reality of it was nothing like what she described. And he said they even had a conversation earlier about James before he even met James. She described the situation, what the situation was going to be like. And you know what? It didn't end up being that way. After the camera stopped rolling and life went on, I believe James became an even bigger problem, or he just was a consistent problem. And Cynthia didn't understand why most people would not want to deal with James. And most people don't want to deal with a woman who's dealing with James. And so I think that's why Anthony kept saying she's unaware of the magnitude of the problem. And I'm trying to say, I don't believe she's unaware. I believe she doesn't care about your feelings. It's a difference. She understands that James can be explosive. She understands that James can be disruptive. But what she's saying is, why do you care? Leave it alone. Just like when people asked her, Andre asked her about James, Anthony asked her about James on camera. What was Cynthia's response? I can handle James. That's what she told us. I look back now on that, and that's somewhat dismissive to your concerns. What she said was, don't worry about that. I can handle James. Well, your handling of James is not what we think is handling of James. There goes the problem. So she says she can handle James, but she can handle James according to the way she wants to handle him, what she's comfortable with. But she's used to that toxic stuff going on with James. We ain't used to that. So when she tells us I can handle James, she can handle the James according to what she feels comfortable with, not what we feel comfortable with. So like I said, it's a difference between being unaware, and then the next level is you're not even willing to do anything different even when I try to make you aware. Anthony said plenty of times, he tried to tell her, and he basically said, I don't understand what you're not getting what I'm saying. Am I not saying it clear enough? He got that little military in him. You know, he's an ex-military man. So I know Andre knows how to communicate concisely, short, probably sometimes abruptly. And Cynthia, he felt Cynthia wasn't getting it. She was getting it, Anthony. She was getting it. She didn't care. You see, Cynthia wants to have her cake and eat it too. James has been in her life a long time. There's some patterns there. There's some history there. He's the father of her children. And what Cynthia is probably getting some benefits from that relationship with James. And it doesn't have to be anything sexual or intimate, anything like, but there's some benefits coming from James. And she doesn't want to disrupt that. And she understands how this man over here, it could be Anthony, it could be any other man, could have a problem with James, but too bad. What she says is, you are going to have to feel comfortable with it because I'm comfortable with it. That's what she's saying. She says, I don't care enough about your feelings and emotions to make a change. That's what she's saying. It's not unaware. It's not unaware. It's a whole nother level. It's unaware. It goes further, and it's unwilling to make the changes in order to tend to someone else's emotional needs, emotional wants, or their own, other people's emotions. Anthony admitted he got sucked in. He sucked in. He said, haven't you listened to Cynthia and the words that come out her mouth and how she speaks? That's how I got sucked in too. I believed it. Anthony admitted he believed it. And he even called out Kojo and said, I watched your interview with her and you got sucked in too. And I'm going to agree with him on that as well. Kojo did get sucked in by Cynthia. I saw several times when I believe he got sucked in by her. But guess what? I joined the party because a lot of us did. He said that Cynthia is going to compliment the heck out of you. She's going to finesse you. She's going to pump you up like she finessed Andre. She finessed Anthony. Because one thing about Cynthia is aware of actually some of her negatives in terms of her emotional detachment. She's actually aware of it. And where the work Cynthia has done is Cynthia has changed her speech. I imagine that back in the day, maybe when Cynthia was in her 20s or 30s, Cynthia had a way more sharper mouth on her. And that was interfering with the way she was in relationships. And I think what Cynthia learned to do was to tone down her speech, tone down her mouth, everything. I believe she did that very well. Just like Jeffrey out here, the baby voice. It's an altering of the way that you speak because you realize that in the past that mouth got you in trouble. Jeffrey toned down her mouth because she realized it got her in trouble in her relationships. So she came up with this baby voice. But the truth of the matter is, as soon as anything goes awry in Jeffrey's life, she reverts back to the mouth. Cynthia's the same way. Cynthia is used to probably have a mouth on her because she grew up in the hood. Like they said, when they grew up in Little Haiti, they grew up in the hood. She had to grow up tough. She had to grow up all her life fighting. So she knows how to fight, and she knows how to fight with her words. She realized that wasn't good in relationships. She's learned how to tone down her words. But the problem is her actions don't follow her words. So if you just go off her words, you get pulled in to this new Cynthia. But once you get on the inside, there is no action behind her words. She's talking as if she's gassing you up. Like Anthony said, she's going to compliment the heck out of you. But when it comes to really, really considering your feelings and actually doing something, she's absent. She's missing in action. She is missing in action. So in a lot of words, she's learned a technique to draw you in. But in the end, she can't close the deal. It really is the same thing going on with Jeffrey. The luring in, the drawing you in, but in the end, you can't live up to the hype in which you built yourself. It's interesting. It's not actually interesting, but you can see how Andre was attracted to both Cynthia and Jeffrey. But in this interview, I want to find out why Anthony was so duped by Cynthia. So why did Anthony get duped? Now we're going to move in a little bit to more of the deeper questions that Little Black Book asked him, because then I start to see exactly how he got duped by Cynthia. One thing is, I can actually understand why he was first attracted to Cynthia. They have a lot of things in common, both being from the same neighborhood, the Little Haiti, the cultural background, all of that. Totally have that in common. They have in common this life that they sort of pulled themselves up from the bootstraps. They didn't come from, rich beginnings. They're from the hood. They both have been able to pull themselves up. They both have been able to educate themselves. They both have been able to move from one financial tier to the new financial tier. Socioeconomic levels, they both have been able to move to different levels. So I could see that attraction. I could see how Anthony is attracted to sort of the hood side of Cynthia because he's from the hood. He has a little bit of that street inside of him. He says he's from the streets. And I can see how he could like the bridge that Cynthia has made from the streets to the boardroom, because in a lot of ways he's made that same arc. He's gone from the streets to the boardroom. He talked about how he was in the Army for 4 years. He talked about how he was a fire paramedic, not travel nurse, what do they call him, a road nurse, transport nurse, some other kind of nurse, before he moved into being an RN and then eventually into this nurse practitioner. He's driven. He goes after what he wants. Same thing with Cynthia. Cynthia goes after what they want. They're ambitious. Okay, so I could see all these things in which the two of them have in common. Another thing about Anthony is he's one of those, what do you call them? What do they call sapiosexuals, when they're attracted to intellectual conversation. and deep thinking, deep conversation, deep thinking. He's not a surface person. So if any of you women, which I know there's a lot of them out there talking about they would be with Anthony, dropping in his DMs. But if you are not a deep thinker and you don't know how to have deep thought conversations, you can forget it. You can forget it. Anthony's not going to be interested in you one bit. If you're one of these girls with a big booty and a smile and all you want to do is go to the club and all that kind of stuff, you can forget it. That's not what Anthony is looking for. So I could see in a lot of ways how he was attracted to Cynthia, because she really does check off a lot of the boxes in which I feel that he is looking for in a woman. He said that prior to, choosing Cynthia or them choosing each other, he was first interested in Mercedes, which we know about. He was interested in Marcia, and he also threw in there a Morgan. So we hear this story about he and Morgan met online first before even being on Ready to Love, that they had a phone date. And their phone date was watching a church sermon for 3 hours. So they were on the phone watching a church service for 3 hours. And then after the 3-hour conversation, they never spoke again. So Morgan never called him and he never called Morgan. And he says, I don't know why it happened. Well, we know why it happened, because you didn't call her. And Morgan likes to be chased. That's why she liked Tony the Tiger. And also explains a little bit more. I don't know if you all remember in the season, there was an episode when both Marcia and Morgan, I think it was Marcia, I definitely know it was Morgan, they went over and hemmed up Anthony and told Anthony, you need to do more chasing. You need to be more assertive, because you're not coming here trying to check for me. And I didn't know at the time that Morgan had a history with Anthony, but I understand that conversation a lot more, because what Morgan is probably saying is, you didn't chase me when you met me outside of Ready to Love, and we had that phone conversation, and you're not chasing me now. And we definitely know that Morgan likes the assertiveness and aggressiveness of a man, and that's not Anthony. Anthony says, I'll call you. He says he would chase a woman he's interested in, but his chase looks a little bit different. It does look a little bit different. And if you're a woman that wants to chase like a Tony, which is what Morgan really wanted, you're not going to be interested in Anthony. So they both realized rather soon, based on what they were looking for, that they weren't the ones for each other. So that's why we didn't see much dating between them on the show. But looks wise, he liked the look of Morgan. Who wouldn't? She's beautiful. He liked Marcia, because he talked about he likes curvy women. And he also liked Mercedes. Now, I want you to keep a pin on those women he liked initially based on just initial conversations. And I think Marcia, maybe he liked Marcia more for her figure, her body. I don't know if he got into too much deep conversation with Marcia. He said he didn't really have any dates with Marcia. I think what he's learned about Marcia has happened maybe after the show. And he says he believes that Marcia is a deep thinker as well. And I think that didn't come off on the show, because a lot of the scenes that were shown with Marcia, honestly, they did seem a little bit superficial, that Marcia was only into fashion and getting dressed. They really didn't show this deeper conversation of Marcia. And I think that part of Marcia came out more in her after interviews, when I saw that as well, that she does have the ability to have higher level thinking. But on the show, she came off as a pretty girl, nice body, but only into fashion and not much more to her. And maybe that's what Anthony thought initially, but now that he's gotten to know her, his viewpoint of her has expanded and it actually has improved. So I'm really just going to concentrate. Oh yeah, and he did say that he had a connection with Sue-Ann as well. Or that he liked Sue-Ann as well, probably because of the intellectual component of Sue-Ann. He probably knew right away that Sue-Ann was more of a deep thinker, probably, and I think that drew him to him. He's drawn to deep thinkers, and that's why I think he enjoyed this conversation with Little Black Book. He wasn't afraid of it, because Anthony is comfortable going deep. He's very comfortable. That's why he has to have a woman who is comfortable going deep, because if you are not comfortable with going deep, you're going to feel very, very uncomfortable with Anthony. Very uncomfortable. And he is going to probably in the end turn away from you too. But to answer my last question that I have for myself is, not the last one, but the last two, is how did Anthony get duped and has he learned his lessons? One thing about lessons in life, and I'm still learning them even at my age, I don't think we ever stop learning our lessons. But I tell you this, if you don't learn them, they just keep coming back and back and back and back until you learn them. You keep thinking that, oh, I'll just go over here to this new person and that's how I get rid of this lesson I need to learn. You know, you discover something about another person in dating, and then you go, I'll just get another person and that's why I'll get rid of that lesson. No, unless you learn that lesson is going to show up in another relationship. And unfortunately, I want to tell you that Cynthia is not new to Anthony. That's what I'm going to say. Anthony didn't learn his lesson prior to Cynthia. That's why he got duped by her, because this is a lesson that has been presented to Anthony plenty of times before. And you know who said it first? I can't believe I'm saying it here now, but you know who said it first? That soothsayer. The soothsayer told Anthony at his reading, and as we know, that soothsayer has been 100% on point. That soothsayer said to Anthony, you wear your heart on your sleeve. She told him that sometimes you talk too much, sometimes you talk too little, and balance is key. That's what she said. And now I know that Anthony is a deep thinker. One thing I know about him is he probably talks a lot. He opens up a lot. He talks about his feelings. He talks about his emotion. He's transparent. And when you meet a person who could be calculating, somewhat like Cynthia is, she's calculating. When you open up to people like a Cynthia, they take that information that you've given them, that you were so willing to give, and they use it against you. That's the talking too much. The talk too little is what the women were complaining about when people said you were closed off. You don't chase me enough. What they're saying is, I need you to talk more, pursue me more, compliment me more, tell me that you want me more. That's what the Suan was complaining about. So, but what she was saying is, you give your energy to the wrong people. And that's a pattern in his life. And I'm going to say I agree with the soothsayer, because I do believe that's the lesson that Anthony didn't learn prior to meeting Cynthia. I can see why Anthony was attracted to Cynthia, because Anthony is a caretaker. Even by profession, he's a caretaker. Nurses care about your good health. They care about your well-being. He is trained. Not only do I believe it is innate in Anthony, it is also nurtured. A lot of us have nature and then we have nurture. We have our nature, but if that part of our nature isn't nurtured, then eventually, it can be diminished over time. Anthony, I believe by nature, is a caretaker. And his profession of being a nurse is a manifestation of that. And thus, every day of his life, being a nurse, caring about others, that caretaking part of him, that desire to caretake, nurtures him. Anthony was the oldest of his family. If you remember Cynthia's interview, Cynthia was the youngest. Anthony grew up taking care of all his siblings. Cynthia grew up the youngest, complaining that she didn't want her older siblings to take care of her. Cynthia was a rebel. Cynthia says she was the most disadvantaged one, but I believe that's probably not true. She probably was more one of the spoiled ones. And I don't want to call it spoiled. I don't want to go that level deep, but I don't think she was the most disadvantaged one in her family. I bet if I lined up all her 8 brothers and sisters, they'd have a lot more tougher stories than Cynthia. But being the caretaker, nurturer that Andre, gosh dog it, if I call this man Andre one more time, being the caretaker and nurturer that Anthony is, I could see him being drawn to the baby over here who looks out for herself all the time, because here he is ready to take care of her and help her along. He saw in Cynthia himself being from the hood, and what he wanted to do was he wanted to elevate her out of the hood just like he was elevated out of the hood. She was elevated maybe because of money, and she's got her own business and she's financially successful. But he wanted to elevate her mindset because he saw that she was still stuck there with James, who is completely stuck in the neighborhood. He's completely stuck in Little Haiti. And Anthony wanted to snatch Cynthia up out of that and care for her and bring her up to a new level. But like I said in my old video or my other video, sometimes people want to be elevated, but they're not ready for the altitude. Now, is this the first time that Andre has tried to caretake and rescue a woman that is emotionally unaware? And the answer would be no. And therein is the pattern, and there is the lesson that he's not learning. The lesson that Anthony is not learning is that he has to draw boundaries over his heart to help and to care for. You know what? I had to do the same thing. Like I said, we all got to learn our lessons, and I've been called an overgiver in my lifetime, and I've had to learn how to balance that, because if you just let it go uncontrolled, you end up caring for and trying to help the wrong people, to the point that sometimes you're working harder at helping them than they are at helping themselves. And it can become a really enabling and a really not a good situation. So the reason why I say that this is the first time Anthony has been here is because we're going to go back to his mother. All of us can go back to our childhood. We can get good things and bad things. And one of the things that Anthony revealed was that he was primarily raised by his grandmother, because his mother was a young mother. And so he said that he calls his grandmother mom. He said he calls his grandmother mom, and it bothers his mother. But he said, well, that's too bad, because it was my grandmother who gave me all of my nurturing. It was my grandmother who cared and loved for me the way that I wanted to be loved as a young boy and a young man. And that's why I call her mom. And he says mothering someone isn't just about birthing them. Does it mean he has a bad relationship with his mother? No. But it does mean that his mother was more than likely emotionally distant, unaware, self-focused, whatever you want to call it. If the mother was a young mother, maybe she had Anthony when she was too young and she didn't have time to focus on him, and she was more focused on whatever she wanted to do as a young woman. His father was gone. His father was incarcerated. So it was his grandmother that cared and loved for him. So the first emotionally unaware, unavailable, self-focused woman in his life was his mother. What I believe has happened to Anthony is that unintentionally he has sought out women who are emotionally unavailable and unaware. And I believe he may think that he has enough for the both of them, and he can some way help them become better. But he needs to give that up, because the mother wasn't the only person he was in a relationship with that did that. He went on to talk about another significant relationship with his babies, the mother of his daughter. Now, throughout the show, and this wasn't all the way quite clear, I'm under the impression, so I'm going to use it. I'm under the impression that Anthony is pretty much the primary caretaker for his daughter. He talks about it a lot. I'm under the impression that his daughter lives with him. I could be wrong, but I'm going to go off that impression. People can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm under the impression that his daughter lives with him, if not the majority of the time, if not all the time, I'm going to say the majority of the time, and at least 50-50. A lot of the time, I believe he has time with his daughter. He talks about, well, why didn't they get married? Why did they break up? And he said that what happened to his the lady who's the mother was that she went through postpartum depression, and the postpartum depression was undiagnosed during the relationship, and they just thought they were having problems. He just thought this woman didn't care for him. He just thought this woman was emotionally unavailable to him and to his daughter. So in postpartum, we know typically the people are depressed. The women are depressed. They detach. They detach from their children. They detach from other people. So he saw a woman emotionally unavailable in that moment for him, his daughter, and everything. And so more than likely he was triggered by that because he has an emotionally unattached, unaware, uninvolved mother. And that became the demise of the relationship. Now, I would say that, well, you can't really count her because she had postpartum depression. Well, I'm not for sure because she might have had postpartum depression, but I'm also not sure that some of that emotional detachment wasn't already there. That's what I'm wondering, if it wasn't already there. He didn't mention if this woman has had additional children. Maybe this is the only child for her and for him. And if he is the primary caretaker for the little girl, for the daughter, that means that even after the postpartum depression ended and she got help, because she did say they went to counseling, I'm sure she got medical attention, the daughter is still primarily cared for by the man. Now, I understand we got new gender roles out here. Anthony said that, you know what? He doesn't have a problem taking care of his daughter. He loves his daughter. He said he grew up cooking and cleaning and ironing. And like he said, he took care of all his siblings. He knows how to raise kids because he's done it his whole life. He's used to doing it. It's why we saw him cooking for Suanne, why he cooked at the mansion when they were there. It's why he could rub Cynthia's corns. He's a caretaker by nature and he nurtures it. But I'm also going to look at what about the nurturing side of the mother? What would allow the mother to give up so much custody of her daughter? Now, I don't want to get gender roles. But it's important to think about. I wonder if the mother already did have some emotional detachment, being unaware, emotionally uninvolved, whatever you want to call it, even prior to postpartum depression. Postpartum depression might have just layered onto it. And if that's the case, then that mother of that baby is in the same pattern as the mother, which means it was there, but then it was also exasperated by the postpartum depression. So then that would mean that in his choosing of her, he didn't learn his lesson. He went from his mother to her. Then I'm going to move on to when he told us that Morgan was his top choice coming into the mansion. And now that we know about Morgan, we say, wow, Morgan is not a nurturer. I don't care what someone will tell. She's not a nurturer. And the fact that he has spent a lot of time with her on the phone and had previous conversations with her, he obviously didn't pick up on that when he spoke to Morgan. Which means to tell me there is something about Anthony that is drawn to independent women who often care more about themselves than they necessarily care about him. Maybe his mother was independent. Maybe the mother of his baby was independent. I think she was. Morgan is independent. Cynthia is independent. And then what Anthony seems to get himself in the situation is some of these independent women don't have a lot of emotional intelligence, because we already know that Morgan is completely unaware of who she is. Morgan is completely unaware of who she is. She sat on this whole season and called Tony toxic and didn't realize she was toxic. Okay. So I'm looking at Anthony and I'm saying, did he learn his lesson with Cynthia? I sure hope he did, because he hadn't learned it before he came into this show, because he went from his mother to possibly his baby, the mother of his baby, to liking Morgan, to liking Cynthia. All of these women are unaware of who they are. He likes these deep conversations. He likes these intellectual conversations, but he's still attracted to women who have done no introspection, who don't understand maybe where their even emotional detachment comes from. He needs to do more work in this area. He needs to recognize that this is a pattern in his life, because if he doesn't change it, the next woman he chooses is just going to be the fifth, the sixth woman in this long line of the women that he's choosing. The soothsayer told him, you put your energy into the wrong women. You are trying to save women from their own emotional self-sabotage, their own emotional turmoil. Morgan is a self-saboteur of her own life. Morgan is beautiful, but her emotional unintelligence, her emotional vindictiveness, her emotional being unaware is actually sabotaging her romantic life. Cynthia, the same thing. Her emotional detachment, her wanting to always win, self-focus, thinking about what's best for her, is sabotaging her personal life. In a lot of ways, I could say even his attraction to Mercedes is a little bit like that. Not because Mercedes is toxic, but a lot of things that people said about Mercedes was that Mercedes friend zoned everyone. Mercedes is able to delineate relationships from her emotions. She's able to do it. Mercedes is not all emotion. She's able to draw lines. That's why she's over here in this friends with benefit relationship with Mark Anthony. She's saying, you know what? I can have a sexual relationship with Mark Anthony and keep it as friends, but not get involved. She could walk that line. You know, she can say, you know what? I still want to do my career. She told Anthony pretty clear, I still want to do my career. She knows how to emotionally detach from men when she needs to in order to stay on the grind that she wants to be in. I'm not saying that she's in the bucket of Morgan or even in Cynthia, but I know I could see in Mercedes how she's able to separate her emotions from what she does. I wouldn't necessarily call her all the way detached like Cynthia seems to be. But the fact that he was attracted to that part of a woman, he's attracted to that part of a woman that is independent and strong. But what he needs to get away from, he needs to get away from choosing women that are too detached from their emotions. Because even though he's attracted to it, once he gets into a relationship with them, he doesn't like it. He leaves it. He left his mother for his grandmother. He left the mother of his child once it really reared its hair there. He just left Cynthia. He left Morgan too. He's attracted to it, but once he's in there and he sees it, he doesn't like it. He's got to be the person that changes, and he's got to be the person that doesn't run to it. He's drawn to it. You know, and we all are drawn to things from our childhood. But once we know what they are, we've got to be extra vigilant on avoiding it. I think there I go again. I think Anthony can do it. Because what Anthony has shown in his life is he has shown discipline. From the military, he has to be disciplined. In his career as a nurse, you have to be very disciplined. And I could tell he said that he's very structured. But what he'll need to do now is he'll need to see this lesson, and he'll need to be disciplined in this. He will need to be disciplined and walk away from the next woman that lures him in because she's independent and she looks like she's independent, too independent or emotionally detached, because he won't like it once he gets on the inside. He needs to start dating someone that makes him feel uncomfortable initially, because that's what it will feel like to him. She will feel uncomfortable initially because it's not going to be what he's used to. But then as he grows to learn and grows with that woman, he will become more comfortable with her because that woman will be more like him, and they will be able to share these deep conversations and share emotions, and neither one of them will feel threatened. Neither of them will feel like they need to run. And neither one of them, like Cynthia was, will try to cover up the real truth because they won't be embarrassed by it or ashamed about it. They'll be open and honest about it. So any of you women are really interested in being with Anthony, you know what you got to do. You know what you have to do. You have to be a deep thinker. You have to be emotionally available and honest. You have to be willing to open up. So if any of you out there got a whole lot of traumas and you don't like to talk, it may lure him in. It may lure him in because he is a caretaker. But if you don't fail to deliver like Cynthia did, he will drop you. He will drop you. So you better be ready to take on a man like Anthony. He said he's opened up a medical concierge business, so you could book an appointment. He said he ain't checking his DMs, but if you book an appointment with his medical concierge business and you pay your $400, he'll show up at your house. That might be the way you get a special session with Anthony. I hope he learns. I hope he learns after this, because I think Anthony is a good catch. I think he's a great guy. I think he's done a lot of growth. I think he's done a lot of maturing over his life. You can see the trajectory of his career. He's got a lot to offer the right woman, but he's not afraid of walking away from the wrong woman. He's not afraid of walking away from the wrong woman. So any woman out there that's going to shoot their shot at Anthony, you better make sure you can deliver, because he is not afraid of walking away from you if you can't deliver on the promises you make on who you are. Anyway, that's it, y'all. Be sure to watch some of my other videos on my channel, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.